Thank you so much for joining. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to TMC's monthly webinar series. This month we are featuring developing cultural competence at the college and university level with the Cultural Navigator. We're excited today to have some guest speakers join us. And today we're joined by our client strategist, Dan Kerr. Dan is our client strategist here at TMC, focuses on some of our key clients, and he is in New York City, actually north of New York City. And we have Kerr Madden-Dent as well joining us today from, she's the president of the HLFL Institute. Thank you both, and we appreciate that you are here to be our guest speakers today. Just a few kind of housekeeping points today to make sure that you have an enjoyable experience with us and you can participate fully. In order to reduce the background noise during the presentation, we'll keep all participants on mute. To interact with us, please type questions in the question box on the right-hand panel anytime during the presentation. We'll pause periodically through the presentation to answer those questions and ensure that we get you some time with our speakers to address any specific questions you might have. Anything we do not answer during the webinar, we'll answer after the webcast in an email to you and ensure that you get an answer to that question. And today's session is being recorded. After the webinar, we'll share the link with you in the registration process and the thank you process that we send back to you after the webinar. And indeed, it will be posted on our corporate website as well. So welcome, and let me hand it now over to our speaker, Dan Kerr. Dan?
Thank you, Lynn, for that introduction, and welcome everybody to this webcast. What we'd like to do today, and you can see here on the agenda, we're here to talk about the application of the Cultural Navigator 24/7 learning platform, and we'll do that in a couple of different ways. Tara will share with you the results of a recent study that she completed, which focused on the use of the Cultural Navigator, preparing East Asian students for study in the United States. So we'll start with a brief introduction to the Navigator. Recognize that not everyone on the line may be familiar with the Cultural Navigator learning platform, so I want to make sure everyone is aware of the platform and what's in it. Tara will also discuss with you, share kind of an introduction to the international market in the U.S., which is growing rapidly. She'll specifically share the results of the study, and then after she shares the results of the study, we're going to pause for questions at that point. Then we'll change gears a little bit, move from Tara's study to what some current TMC clients, leading colleges and universities, how they're applying the Cultural Navigator in their environment. And we'll also be joined today by Anna Reyes from the University of Pennsylvania, who will talk about how she's been using it in a class at UPenn as well, and then we'll have an open forum. So that's what we have in mind. I'd like to start with a polling question. Lakeisha, if you could lead us through this to get to know the audience a little bit better. Folks, and we see that 69% of the folks on the line are educational faculty or administrators. We've got 6% from HR. We've got about 6% recruiters and admissions folks, and we've got about 20% others. Let me talk a little bit about the Navigator itself. So we're talking about the building cultural competence at the university level. So the Cultural Navigator tool, for the benefit of those who are not familiar with it, includes a assessment. You can see that in the big circle right in the middle there. So if people go in and they actually do an assessment, which helps them increase their self-awareness, how their cultural orientations impact how they interact with others in the workplace, how they think and make decisions in the workplace, and how they view them in the workplace. Once they've done that assessment, then individuals can go and compare their personal cultural assessment to other colleagues, whether those be individuals or teams that they're a member of. They can compare them to other countries. And they also have extensive learning that's available to them on the website, which enables them to develop their cross-cultural competence and there's a whole series of briefing packets just in time on over 100 different countries. So that's a very brief introduction to Navigator. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tara, who will share with you the results of her exciting research. Tara, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. It's wonderful to be part of the webinar, and welcome to everyone joining us today. I'm going to start with the climate here in international education in the United States and briefly describe an introduction into the study. Now, to prepare our college graduates for today's increasingly complex globalized economy, us educational leaders here in the U.S. are now placing a greater emphasis on bridging cultural gaps through international programs. These programs are aimed to foster cultural knowledge, intercultural communication skills, adaptability, and cross-cultural sensitivity. And one such international program used by U.S. schools is to host international students on campus. Now, the U.S. is a top study abroad destination and has continued hosting increased numbers of international students every year over the past decade. Last year, the U.S. hosted more than 886,000 international students. This is a 56.8% increase since 2004. As current data suggests, student mobility trends will continue, and educational leaders must prepare for the intended and unintended consequences of this change in our academic climate. Hosting international students has many benefits as they contribute to U.S. campus diversity, high-quality research, and more than $26 billion to the U.S. economy. But to host this unique student demographic, cultural adjustment needs to be supported and fostered on the campus level to support student success in the U.S. Over 43% of all international students studying in the U.S. are from China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, whose academic systems and culture are very different from Western style. The climate's influx of multinational demographics has truly enriched U.S. campuses, but at the same time has created cross-cultural challenges for its stakeholders. For example, upon arrival to the U.S., international students are prone to experiencing a series of acculturation challenges and distress while adjusting to the academic system, communication styles, law and policies, social etiquette, food, healthcare, transportation, you name it. And this is all simultaneously happening as students are attending student orientations and beginning new classes. So this is just compounding the academic pressures and the adjustment stress. Now, as mentioned previously, just under half of the U.S. students, international students studying in the U.S. are from Eastern Asian countries. And research shows that this student group has demonstrated higher levels of adjustment-related distress, which can impact, if left unresolved, their academic success, socio-cultural adjustment, health and psychological well-being, communication, and persistence. This group also tends to avoid using campus counseling services. So this is more than student prep, but this is actually a student retention issue. Now, to address this challenge, earlier cross-cultural training and preparation has been found to aid in the transition and adjustment of international student groups on U.S. cultures. Now, educational leaders and scholars agree that cultural knowledge and intercultural competencies are critical to student success during study abroad stages. Without such capacities, students may become dissatisfied with their academic experience and not only underperform academically and with language development, but also seek alternative options that support their unique needs. Furthermore, dissatisfied international students also share their subpar experiences with family and friends back home directly and then on a mass level through social media. In today's 21st century educational market, our students are being asked to demonstrate intercultural skills beyond the academic traditional competencies of their department so that they may navigate the diverse workforce and communicate with people from diverse backgrounds.
Okay, that's great, Tara. Thank you for that. And the second poll here, we're interested in terms of what pre-departure training that you're providing. And what we're seeing there that 57% are using office staff support, 14% are using no credit college orientation programs, and 43% others. So there's a lot of richness in the other. Very interesting to see that there's 0 online webinar and coaching, and 0 for college credit. Interesting input, Tara, which I think reinforces probably the importance of your study. Tara, back to you.
Thank you, Dan. The poll responses are quite interesting, especially in relationship to current literature's recommendations. So I'll just go ahead and continue with the research study, and we'll discuss both the poll results and the study's results in our Q&A session. Now, the study I'm discussing today was a phenomenological research study, and we're looking at the transition and adjustment of Eastern Asian undergraduate international students who either used one or another cross-cultural preparation treatment. The purpose of this qualitative research study was to investigate the transition and adjustment experiences through student stories as they were occurring from before through the end of their first semester at a Western U.S. research university. The study collected 20 weeks of student participant narratives or stories from 7 journal reflections, 3 in-person interviews, a quantifiable online survey, and 2 cultural reports generated by the Cultural Navigator. Participants originated from China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, and were placed into either the treatment group or the university group. While still back in their home country during the pre-departure stage, the treatment group participants received a 4-week cultural study treatment, combining the Cultural Navigator and a student-centered curriculum, while the university group received the school standard services, including website and online reading material, and access to the institution's office staff advisors. After arriving to the U.S., data collection continued through the fall semester and had 3 written journal reflections that all students submitted, 3 in-person interviews there with the researchers, and then conducted the online survey. Dan, you want to forward the screen? Excellent, thank you. For the treatment itself, the 4-week online cultural treatment was designed as an intensive self-paced mini-term course to explore culture, how culture influenced identity and worldviews, the U.S. culture and the academic system, and how cross-cultural dynamics could influence adjustment into the U.S. The treatment used the Cultural Navigator, and in particular, the Cultural Orientations Indicator and the Country Comparison Report, in conjunction with weekly homework assignments, including prompted questions and written reflections. The treatment group participants also had access to the online learning modules and resources available on the Cultural Navigator. Now, research findings were revealed through the qualitative narratives the students shared, and 3 themes emerged from the data. The 3 themes included, I'm on my own in a foreign land, which described initial transition and the trial and error learning experiences. I wish I had known more, cultural knowledge and adjustment training. And thank God I had friends to help. And this pertained to the social adjustment and social support not related to specific school initiatives. So there were differences found within the treatment group and the university group's narrative, within the data. The treatment group had referenced having more cultural knowledge, awareness, and sensitivity, more self-confidence to converse and engage with U.S. natives, had more culturally accurate expectations of initial interaction experiences with U.S. natives, and an ability to clearly communicate cross-cultural management strategies to cope with or bridge cultural differences. Now, these quotes are just a few examples of gained cultural knowledge from the treatment group. The first one touched on and referenced differences in U.S. academic culture and the home culture. There was a reference to differences with communication styles, direct, low context, single focus tasks carried out in sequential order, and he later wrote about how there was a need to know the cultural differences in order to participate successfully and adjust in U.S. classrooms. These quotes demonstrate how the treatment group expressed having increased confidence to talk and engage with U.S. natives, and how, in addition to increased confidence, it also decreased anxiety. As part of the cultural treatment, students were asked to suggest when, where, or how cultural differences could be of issue in various U.S. settings after arrival. The treatment group participants were able to communicate scenarios where cultural differences would likely be a challenge. And they used the country comparison reports, primarily their cultural orientation indicator, cultural profile, and then applied it through a series of questions and reflective writing. The reflections demonstrated that this group had an understanding of cultural knowledge and how culture influenced their adjustment, particularly with interactions with peers and faculty in the U.S. learning environment. To demonstrate this, one of the quotes here states that a student anticipated, before arriving, that group work interactions in the U.S. would be much different, and how they would be different. This early result and awareness to the cultural gap allowed treatment group participants to begin investigating culture's impact and ways to manage when they experience it. And finally, this last slide regarding the treatment group's narrative pertains to knowledge of management skills to bridge the cultural gaps. Building on the accurate expectations of what they learned in the treatment, these participants discussed actions for managing difficult cultural differences, which actually differed from narratives we collected from the university group. This treatment group was able to articulate cultural knowledge of U.S. particulars and the appropriate methods to integrate upon arrival in the academic and sociocultural environment. Methods included practicing active engagement, intentionally being social, shifting cultural styles to be more direct, even proximity to other U.S. or other international students was mentioned. In contrast, the university group data revealed differences within their narrative in the form of foregone reference. These participants who received no cultural preparation treatment before arriving to the U.S. were able to identify their own cultural preferences and their feelings associated with the culture challenge, but were rarely able to communicate about U.S. cultural styles and norms and how their styles differed from the U.S. culture and how they could remedy the cultural conflict that they were experiencing. As expressed in the university group's narrative, these participants expressed acting more passively and quietly and not addressing the cultural conflict. For example, this one university group participant mentioned that she grew to dislike one of her courses because a class partner was lazy and uninterested in working with her, as he preferred, and this was a U.S. partner, preferred to study at home and do homework independently. Well, she took it personal, not knowing that this was a common study habit for U.S. students. She expressed great frustration and helplessness about the situation, and she described the U.S. class partner's actions as a personal reflection on his character and work ethic. She ultimately chose to remain passive and quiet until the class ended. And many university group participants expressed not preparing at all for U.S. study or culture, but only preparing for legal and logistical needs. One participant mentioned that culture was not even considered because the school touched on it a little bit, but the emphasis was on other preparation needs. University group narratives demonstrated less cultural knowledge, specifically of U.S. styles, and less analysis of intentional resolve to mediate and bridge the cultural differences. Many times, U.S. participants reference interaction avoidance, and the lack of interaction with U.S. natives was expressed by the participants to have influenced both their social skills and adjustment, but also their English language development, as demonstrated by the bottom quote here. Let's see. If we go to the next slide, Dan. Just recently, I became familiar with a lot of international students. This university group participant discussed that she came here for English development, but instead did not interact with U.S. natives and did not therefore develop the English skills that she had as a goal before arriving. And for the time allotted with this webinar, the implications for practice from the research based on the findings encourage educational institutions to apply a pre-departure cross-cultural training program or academic course to increase cultural knowledge, more accurate expectations, the competencies that encourage engagement and confidence, to decrease anxiety, and to develop those intercultural skills before students arrive on campus. Other implications for a field based on the research findings would include that the increased cultural knowledge can be transferable to all students, and higher ed professionals may want to consider how this tool could be used for domestic students and also for faculty and scholars.
Okay, thank you, Tara, for that summarizing in 15 minutes what I'm sure took you several years of study. So thank you for that. At this point, I'd like to ask everyone, there is a box on your screen which is for depositing of questions, and we've got some time here. Questions, just type in whatever questions that you have. And got one here. The question, first one I'm going to ask you, Kara, from the group. Will someone share the specific ways that CED is being used in training? What activities are coming in? Thank you, Yolanta, for that question. We'll actually be illustrating that in one of the segments that follows. So thank you for that. What are the learning goals for the cultural communicator? Did these match results? Tara, do you want to take that one?
What were the learning goals? I'm assuming learning objectives for using the Cultural Navigator. In the pre-departure treatment, the learning objective was to identify what the cultural preferences, thinking styles, interaction styles, sense of self styles were for the international students, to bring awareness to their cultural preferences and tendencies and styles. Then the second objective was to identify those same cultural preferences from the U.S. perspective. The third objective was to identify the similarities and the differences, or therefore the gaps between the two cultural preferences. Identify how that could play into the transition and adjustment in the classroom, on campus, with peers in dorms or off-campus housing, and with faculty and administrators or with internships. There was a goal of a better understanding of what culture was, and a goal of how it shaped the worldview and interactions of the students, the international students.
Another one, Tara, this one's from our colleague Elijah Bonarigo. I apologize for any mispronouncing. Were the pre-departure treatment sessions generally delivered in English or in the native language? And what special considerations are there for teaching cultural skills for English as a second language?
For the pre-departure treatment, part of the Cultural Navigator usage is delivered or offered in the international students' native language. So when they wanted to take the COI, that was offered if the international student chose to take it in that language, or they could take it in English. For this particular study, these international students, one of the qualifications to participate in the study was that they had to have been accepted to the university and had to have passed their standardized English language exam. The rest of the treatment was conducted in English. It was reviewed by their native language speaking interns on the university campus, and a lot of the IRB and ethical research practices and methodologies were translated for them. So before they began the treatment, everything was clearly communicated, and then the actual treatment itself was partially offered in their language, and then the rest was in English.
Time for one more question. And by the way, for folks on the line, you see if you do post a question, again, anyone that we don't answer live, we promise to come back with an answer to everybody after the program. Tara, with regard to the East Asian students, clearly there's a strong business case for increasing the body of knowledge about these students, particularly with the large number of them coming to the United States. Any, from your perspective, any surprise to you in terms of what the students and their very rich narratives and sharing with you, what they said and experienced as opposed to what the literature had predicted?
Well, there were a couple differences within the student demographics, but most aligned with what the literature had suggested. For example, avoiding campus counseling services to aid with cross-cultural challenges. The literature, which states that counseling is typically avoided, was also found accurate in our data. Students did not want to go seek the counselors, and they also said that the campus counselors could not relate to their unique international student experiences or didn't want to bother other people with their problems, which did correlate with our literature review. The only difference that I would say found between the literature and our findings is the contribution from the student narrative, indicating that since the cultural treatment took a lot of time and a lot of effort and was a cultural study that helped support their adjustment and academic success, they recommended that it be worth academic credit. And that has not been found in the literature yet. These students said that that it should be mandatory and that it was very critical to their health and to their academics. So I did not find that so far in the literature.
That's great. Okay, thank you. A question was posed earlier on about other applications of the Navigator. So we're going to change gears a little bit. We're going to leave unscripted time at the end, so you'll have an opportunity, if there are additional questions about Tara's research, you'll have an opportunity to deposit those. We'll respond to those. Let me get into how Cultural Navigator is currently being used at some leading colleges and universities in other ways. So Tara's research focused on preparing East Asian students to study in the United States. Let's take a look at what some other leading colleges and universities are doing. So Notre Dame, for instance. So Notre Dame uses the Cultural Navigator tool as part. It really is the backbone of one of their executive education programs on intercultural management. They also use it for both their undergraduate and MBA students in an intercultural communication course. And the CN7, by the way, that's shorthand. Cultural Navigator has been around for a while. So we're in the 7th generation, and we actually had a little update on that about a year or so ago. So when we speak of Cultural Navigator, sometimes we use interchangeably CN7 or CN7.5. So notice they also use it for their executive MBA students as well, and to prepare them for some specific country-specific consulting projects that they do in Argentina, China, Singapore, and so forth. And similar how Tara had used it in her study for students preparing to study in the United States, Notre Dame uses it as a pre-departure for their students that do a 6-week immersion program, undergraduate students, in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and China. Columbia Business School uses the Cultural Navigator, or CN7, in their MBA Managerial Negotiations course. So students in that MBA course explore the interaction and the impact that culture has on business practices and how folks from different cultures negotiate. Actually, that's one of the features in Cultural Navigator. You can go to the countries that we feature, and you can actually compare, for instance, the negotiating approach, say, in the U.S. to the negotiating approach in China, or you could compare France to England. Basically, any of the countries that we carry, you can actually compare their approach to negotiation. Darden uses it in an exciting way. All of their international students in their MBA program, when they come in, one of the first things that they do is they complete their COI assessment, their cultural orientations assessment, in groups, in study teams that they work with, and they make sure that each of those study teams includes a student, at least one student from outside the United States. Thunderbird uses it in their cross-cultural communications program and in the negotiation course. And all, I repeat, all MBA and executive MBA students are required as part of their study to complete the COI to enhance their self-awareness in terms of their own cultural orientations and to reflect on the results. Also, ESPN, if you're unfamiliar with ESPN, hablo un poquito de español, but my Portuguese is not nearly as good. That is a university in Brazil, and they actually use the CN7 in their capstone multicultural management course that students take in their senior year. And most of these students in this program are currently working for global and multinational companies or intend to do so in the future. And then last example I'll share with you before I call upon my colleague Anna Reyes from University of Pennsylvania is the Booth School of Business, part of the University of Chicago. So all their entering students actually participate in a 4-hour COI. When we say COI, that's the actual assessment, the Cultural Orientations Indicator. So they actually all participate in a workshop where they reflect, they do the COI, they reflect on the results, and they increase self-awareness, and they also develop what we call the 4 cultural skills. And from our research and our literature, when we speak of the 4 cultural skills, We speak of the concept of due diligence, preparing to interact with others from a cultural perspective different than your own. We emphasize the concept of style switching, being self-aware and having the humility and intellectual curiosity to be able to switch, to actually switch and suspend your own preference to be effective with working with others who might have a different preference. So we have style switching. Cultural dialogue, which is really a structured way of having a discussion with someone who from a different cultural orientation and agreeing in terms of the kind of culture between you, how you're going to do things in the future. And this concept of cultural mentoring, which is drawing upon the expertise of others who have deep experience with the culture. And at Booth, all of the students actually explore their COI. Another dimension with the COI, which as I mentioned, Anna talked about and we've talked about so far, individual COI. But remember when I gave you that 1-minute overview of the Cultural Navigator, we also talked about the ability to compare profiles not only to individuals, but to prepare them to group. So what Booth does is they actually take a look at the aggregate COI. So they'll actually look at the distribution of the orientations within a group as well. And Darden does something very similar. So those are several examples of what some leading schools are doing. And now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Anna Reyes from the University of Pennsylvania, and she can share what she's been doing in her class and the results of an actual presentation that she recently made. Anna, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. I'm happy to come in and talk a little bit about how I've been using the Cultural Navigator as part of a course. So this is a course titled 21st Century Leadership Development, Integrating Coaching into Culture into Coaching Practice. It's housed in the Organizational Dynamics Master's Program, which is an organizational studies program with an educational rather than a research mission. We target working professionals immersed in the everyday opportunities and challenges of global organizational change. And our student body is wildly diverse. We just this year are in a class of 16. It's a master's level class. We have students from Saudi Arabia, India, Kenya, Israel, Bostonian, born in Hong Kong, raised in Thailand, an Amish woman, married to a Mexican partner. So we straddle the globe. We also straddle the university. We have students from the Masters in Public Administration at Fells. We have people from Wharton Ventures and Wharton Investing, Nonprofit Leadership and Social Work, the Graduate School of Ed in Intercultural Education. So we have to cater to students that run the gamut from an American raised in Pennsylvania who's had a pretty monocultural life to people that have lived and studied and worked across the world. So, and I straddle that in my practice as well. I have a global leadership and collaboration, virtual organization development practice, and I teach at Penn in organizational dynamics and do executive education. So the course is a theory practice course, and we draw on many educational approaches for accelerating culture learning, and so that we can apply culture learning to coaching. And so the course begins with a battery of cultural assessments, and then we require students to help each other to integrate the whole set of assessments and take each other through a complex development planning and coaching process so that at the end of the course they can apply what they've learned about coaching across cultures to an actual situation. So to provide students with some insight in the beginning, we give them cultural intelligence and then cultural preference assessments. We look at biases and we look at positive psychology, since much of culture learning assumes that people are doing their best in whatever practice and knowledge they've developed in their life, and so we try to put a theoretical basis to that. The Cultural Navigator is one of the tools we use to assess cultural preferences because, you know, as people have been talking here, it's a pretty comprehensive tool. It allows people to compare their preferences with another individual, with a team, or even with a country. We teach cultural preferences in combination with how do you manage cultural stereotypes that come from any kind of shorthand tool. But then they use the Cultural Navigator to coach a person from a different culture. So what we did this year was we took a few of the students' final projects in the course and presented them in a professional development workshop at the Eastern Academy of Management. And the cases that were really interesting from the class last year were a couple of cases of training expats to function better in a new expatriate coaching assignment. Another coaching assignment was helping an East Asian analyst who was kind of stuck in an American organization, unable to move up, had kind of reached a glass ceiling, and trying to figure out the cultural dimensions of that in a corporate setting. And then we had one student who actually wanted to designed a whole program for using the Cultural Navigator for East Asian students, undergrads adapting to Penn. We had another student who designed an exchange program for Chilean miners, engineers, to go to Canada. So what we do is we try to accelerate cultural learning, sometimes from ground zero, but other times try to help people put words to extremely global experiences. We have many third culture people, and so that they can help others to understand their own cultural functioning. And then because they're working professionals, they apply it to a corporate, an academic, or a nonprofit kind of coaching assignment. So I want to stop here because I could talk about this for a very long time, but I think that's probably good enough.
That's great, Anna. Really appreciate you sharing that example from your class. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Lynn Putz, our Director of Solutions. And this is open forum time, participants, so please throw in any question that you would like. I would leave about 10 minutes before 10 minutes of questions before we wrap it up right on the hour. So Lynn, over to you for any of the questions that have come in.
Super. Thank you, Dan, and Anna and Tara. This has been really fantastic so far. And we have some more questions that we want to get to before we wrap up. So let me start with a question that came in here about a pretest. So back to the treatment, Tara specifically. The question is, was there any pretest test prior to the pre-departure treatment? And there's a follow-up to that, but let me pause there and see if you'd like to address that one first. Sarah?
Thank you, Lynn. Pretest. In this current research study, there was no pretest to then compare in the post-arrival stage. The goal of or purpose of this qualitative phenomenological research study was to gather the experiences about cultural knowledge and different cultural styles and the adjustment transition perspectives of the students. So we did begin with the cultural orientations indicator hosted on the Cultural Navigator to gauge their cultural preferences, but then we did not have a post-test to compare if the cultural preferences changed upon arrival. That is included in the research study's future research recommendation section, and also it is one of my personal recommendations for the few practitioners currently administrating or teaching pre-departure academic and culture prep courses, such as such as the ones that we teach in the fall.
Thank you for that, Tara. Really great. Follow-on question is coming from the same person, Sonia, and her question is, and this is a really interesting question for all of us as we relate to the intercultural field around judgment and being able to select or treat people differently or identify people as particularly appropriate or inappropriate for positions or for acceptance. So this question came from that perspective, and the question is this: will students be treated differently based on their levels of cultural competence?
I'll just jump in real quick and add a little bit to that. Just from a faculty and academic and administrative background, the purpose of the cultural training for this is for all international students in my field to then strictly support and aid their transition and adjustment through the pre-departure stage into post-arrival stage. So in that context, it is not identifying one student demographic over another based on cultural competencies. It would just be a college prep course for all and an inclusive enrollment.
Fantastic, and that kind of philosophy is definitely supported by what Anna said, very much in alignment with positive psychology. The idea of appreciative inquiry is embedded into how we speak about culture from a TMC and a Cultural Navigator perspective. So the kind of the core of the cultural orientations indicator is the neutral vocabulary that helps to describe the differences and the synergies and similarities that people may have based on cultural preferences. So thank you for that. That's always one that we wrestle with to articulate most compelling in a most compelling way. Thank you for that. So another question from Nadia. So the question is, when do we begin a conversation, or how do we begin a conversation when faculty have no idea on how to address cultural differences? And so there's some resistance, not only from the faculty, but also the students, in terms of understanding the concept and really finding business results or business imperatives to address these. So perhaps I add that to Anna, or ask that to Anna. Did you have any resistance? And if you did, what did you do to overcome that resistance? Anna?
Yes, thanks. So this course was a course I began in 2005 as I really saw the need among our student body to integrate cultural issues into their organizational studies. And, you know, I work as an executive coach. My practice is global. And so I tried to find a way that didn't require me to convince anyone else that this was important. So I didn't actually have to deal with a lot of other faculty. I built this course, and we've developed it over the years. It has a consistent enrollment, and I'm now getting students from across the university in roles where they're dealing with extreme diversity, global diversity, and extreme professional diversity, and extreme differences in cultural competence. So we're catering to that group of people, and the course is very well accepted in the Dynamics program and, you know, across the university, because students register from these different programs. And so I see faculty moving in this direction because there's need. So until there is need to deal with extreme cultural differences, it's really hard for people to begin a conversation. It's taking advantage of those little moments when they're hit in the face with diversity they can't cope with, and then they're interested. And this is a tool, so it makes it, tools always make it easier for people to at least have some framework for beginning a dialogue.
Anna, thank you so much for that insight. I wonder if I might be able to bring Tara into this and see if you experienced resistance in your work with university structures. Tara?
Thank you, Lynn. The question relating to faculty interest in this and resistance to it, and the student interest and student resistance, as I found in academia, teaching at the university level for a few years before we started our international consulting, is that when I taught it to undergraduate and graduate students, both in a multicultural studies course with domestic and international students, the students found it fascinating, helpful, and that it kind of carried into their other classes and into their non-academic life. When the class was halfway through or towards the end, other faculty members found out we were using the Cultural Navigator and the impact it had on the classroom dynamics, the understanding between the students and their different cultures, and also the connection it created between myself as the professor and the students. And the faculty were very interested in learning more and how they could be involved or use that tool in their courses as well to help them be better instructors and connect more with students from cultures they did not understand.
Thank you, Tara. Really excellent examples on the need and how that need is then presented and demonstrated. We received another kind of addition to that question, and it's the challenge of having invisible students in the classroom. And they may be invisible because of their physical features, their cultural display in terms of nationality, and because of their language proficiency as well. They can be non-participatory, and what one of the participants here in our webinar called invisible. So I wonder if I could just put that back to either yourself, Anna, or Tara, and see if there's a real experience that you have had with what this one webinar participant called invisible classroom participants or invisible students. Either of you want to contribute to that?
I'll just touch on it quickly.
Hello?
Anna, you want to take this one?
No, go ahead. I would also like to touch on that, but go first. I just was muted somehow.
Yeah, the quick addition I'd like to touch on for the quote-unquote invisible students is that there are different learning styles and classroom participation styles that can go sometimes unnoticed or carry out in more passive ways. The one thing related to our discussion here with international students and with the Cultural Navigator is that it also provides a new forum for students to express themselves and to connect with other students in the classroom. For example, when we had homework assignments in the class using the Cultural Navigator, I had students from all over the world in this multicultural course, and they were able to take a little bit more time. Those who didn't like to participate verbally in class as much as other students, they were able to take a little bit more time and connect with their peers either on the Cultural Navigator forum or through our online classroom portal and in many different media methods. So it actually helped to bring them into the conversation and learn from their their perspectives and opinions and contribute to the entire class gain.
Thank you, Tara, for that. Anna, did you have something you wanted to contribute to that same question?
I do. We've had a lot of East Asian students, Chinese, Thai, Japanese, Korean, in the class over the years, and the class itself is designed to make sure that invisibility doesn't occur. So one of the things that happens when you use a number of culture learning tools in a very diverse group is that no one can be invisible because everyone has a profile. And we pair people to talk about their profiles with one another as part of the learning. We also invite people, so if you're from a culture that doesn't just speak up, then you have to define the situation in which people are in as a new situation in which maybe the practices from your original culture aren't necessarily the right ones for anyone. And so we define participation as part of this new situation and create all kinds of opportunities and invite people to participate. And I always have to laugh when people say, well, you know, the Chinese or the Japanese, they sit quietly, they don't participate, they don't say anything. We never have those issues. People participate. They may not, jump and call things out, but everyone participates in every part of the class. So really it's finding the tool, using tools to help people understand how their roles might change in a new environment, and class participation is only one of those.
Anna, thank you so much for that. And I want to respect everyone's time. We are getting to the top of the hour, so if I could just remind everyone that we have a website available for learning more about the Cultural Navigator. It's called explore.culturalnavigator.com. And in that site, you see a very simple representation of the value that the Cultural Navigator could bring to your organization, to your university, to your college, to your educational institution, along with some very important testimonials that help show the impact of the work that we do. So very important to remember to use explore.culturalnavigator.com to fully understand the opportunities that the Cultural Navigator could bring to you. Also, we welcome you back this time, same place, in 1 month. And at that point, we're going to be talking about embedding cultural competence into your organization, or actually how to get the buzz going around cultural competence and use some of that snowball effect to make sure that cultural competence and the language and the neutral vocabulary of differences and an inclusive work environment can be realized. So we're excited. I'll be joined by Ken Ballinger, our Managing Director of TMC, next month. So with that, I will close. I want to thank Tara, Anna, and of course Dan Kerr, our client strategist, for hosting this month's webinar. We look forward to having you back next month, and until then, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining, and take care. Bye-bye.